Welcome back into the Wolves Den. I am the hostess with the mostest, Jay Bir. Make sure you follow me on Twitter at DJ Bir. Get at me. I like to converse on the tweeter machine here. I am finally not flying solo for this one. Unfortunately, you may not be able to see much of her, but our good friend of the show here, Kara Ritchie. Technical problems and all, but we're grinding through it because that's how we do. Kara, how are you doing today?
I think I'm doing okay. I've got some coffee. I've got all kinds of computer issues, but other than that, I think we'll live. Maybe, hopefully.
Hopefully we can get through this here. And it's our understanding you even did your hair all nice too for us. And technology ain't it grand?
I brushed my hair. I've got on lipstick. I did not wear my pajamas to work, which is usually totally acceptable in radio world.
Right.
But it doesn't matter anyways. All for naught.
We'll get you an IOU set up for this one here.
Okay.
All right, let's just dive into things here. Let's see here. Men, last week taking on the Georgia teams. You see the stats here for the folks watching. We got a couple of pretty good teams here, both 12-5 in conference. You see both are putting up insane amounts of points. Both rebound at a pretty decent clip. Assist a little lower than normal, but they tend to move the ball around. They score a lot. In fact, Georgia Southern, they're one of the top scoring teams in the country. So Arkansas State had a lot of that to deal with. And frankly, I personally wasn't optimistic about these two teams coming into this week. Kara, kind of what were your feelings, especially because there seemed to be some good vibes going with this team playing coming into these matchups.
Unfortunately, this was when you looked at both of these matchups on paper, you knew it was going to be a really tough test because both of the Georgia schools' strengths seemed to kind of play into A-State's weaknesses. They were just bad matchups with these teams. Arkansas State was a double-digit underdog in both of these games. And if you look, both of the schools were able to, both Georgia Southern and both Georgia State have been really, really good this year at forcing their opponents into mistakes. Turnovers, both of them have really good steal numbers.
Yeah.
And A-State at times they've done better as of late before this Georgia road trip, but there's been times when they've been sloppy with the basketball. And when you're turning it over 17, 18, 19 times a game, and then on top of that, you're allowing your opponent to shoot, in the case of Georgia Southern, 61%, and in the case of Georgia State, almost 50% from three. Those numbers just don't bode well at all for a win.
Yeah, and especially when in both of these games, Arkansas State really didn't shoot all that great from beyond the arc themselves, and kind of a little bit digging themselves a hole. You understand why they were taking a lot of threes, but they just weren't falling, despite you see a couple falling on our screen here. Is it just one of those things where we've seen this team where they just get behind, and then this is just one of those cases where the threes just weren't falling, or is it just flat out that the Georgias are just better than Arkansas State?
I mean, it can be both. The Georgia schools right now are better teams, better programs than Arkansas State is this season. And then additionally, when you are behind, you are prone to kind of try and jack some up and go for a little bit of a rally. And to Arkansas State's credit, all year long, even when they've been behind better teams, they've fought back and made games of it. But again, these teams are just better than the Red Wolves right now, and so it was always going to be an uphill battle.
Absolutely, and again, it kind of goes to, well, at least the Georgia State game here, just to that weakness of just there's not a lot of scoring options beyond one Ty Cockfield, who had 20, had a great game in that one for him personally. Again, he kind of struggled from three as well, but still came away with 20 points in that one, whereas against Georgia Southern, a couple other dudes kind of chipped in. Canbert Cush had him a career game right now, 15 points in that one. Salif Booty, 12 in that one, and Ty kind of led the way once again. So really, for me, this whole team has been Ty Cockfield and a bunch of other guys. Is that kind of what you've noticed?
It's hard for that not to be the case. One, I mean, you credit, not to take anything away from anybody else on this team, Ty Cockfield is an amazing scorer. He's still in the running to have the best all-time individual scoring season ever in Arkansas State history. He's trying to chase down Adrian Banks right now, who set that number more than a decade ago, and he's got a legitimate shot. I haven't looked at his numbers today, so I cannot remember for the life of me what he needs to average over these next two games. It's probably in the 30s, which is obviously more than his scoring average, but if you were to add in a Sun Belt Conference tournament game, then there's an excellent chance that Ty gets to that number this season. So he's done amazing things. There's been several times this year where he's led the conference in scoring. He's going to set the all-time single-season record for most free throws made in a year at Arkansas State. But again, the question all this year is, who is the consistent number 2 guy behind him? And as you mentioned, you'll have games where other guys go out and get double digits. I mean, it's just the fact that there is Ty is a consistent 20-point guy, but there's not even a consistent 15-point guy or a 12-point guy or a 10-point guy. Some days you'll get that scoring from Grantham Gillard. Some days you'll get it from Tristan Wally. Some days you'll get it from Jay Bir, but you don't have that consistent number 2, and that's been an issue for Arkansas State all year.
All right, so an over weekend for the Red Wolves here. Let's take a look at the standings because, again, the Southern or the Georgias there, we're definitely towards the top. But Texas State currently leading the way, so we got a little log jam there, 1 through 3, I guess in Pod A. We need to get used to saying it. All 3 of them at 12 and 5, and then you kind of get into some of these sort of middle tier things. Texas Arlington only a game behind, surprisingly, as they've kind of struggled of late. But Louisiana there, you see 8 and 8, and then this is where kind of the middle class sort of gets all bunched up here. Monroe also there at 8 and 8, Coastal Carolina, and then South Al ASU right there at 6 wins in conference, and then Little Rock hanging on to that 10 spot there. They are definitely fighting for their lives in this one, and then obviously they're bringing up the rear App State and Troy. App State also tied with Little Rock right now, so there's still a lot yet to be decided in this one, and the seeding could really it could range in a lot of different spots there for Arkansas State. In fact, what do we have left here? We got that. Wait, here we go. What's left?
Louisianas.
Yes, that for Arkansas State, they've got the Louisianas left. South Alabama right now currently in the 8th seed has the Carolinas. Little Rock obviously shares the travel with Arkansas State. App State got USA and Troy, and then Troy has the Carolinas as well. So everybody's kind of playing everybody down here at the bottom of the brackets. And what do you think of the chances are? How high do you think Arkansas State could get? Because, I mean, really, you could see them sweeping this weekend. You could also see them getting swept over the weekend, and you could see them splitting it. So there's still, like I said, a lot yet to be decided. Kind of how do you see this sort of playing out this weekend?
You have to have some kind of advanced mathematical degree to be able to figure out exactly where you think Arkansas State is going to land. Because because honestly, A-State could, I think maybe could get as high as like the 6. They could also, it is still also not completely out of the question for the Red Wolves to miss the tournament entirely.
Yeah.
So you've got that going on. Just a reminder of how tiebreakers work in the Sun Belt. If it's head-to-head, if it's 2 teams in a tiebreaker, then it's head-to-head, right?
Right.
If they have the same record head-to-head, then you look at their record against the best team in the Sun Belt Conference, then the second best team, the third best team, the fourth best team, blah, 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 blah. Because right now there are 3 schools sitting at 12 and 5, and we don't know who's going to be number 1 in the Sun Belt Conference. It makes it really hard to try and figure out what teams would have a tiebreaker over another if, say, A-State ended up tied with South Alabama and they're both 1-1 against each other. So that's a huge mess. Then additionally, if you end up, say A-State wins out this weekend and the Louisiana schools both go over. So then you would have Arkansas State, the Ragin' Cajuns, and ULM all sitting at 8 and 8. So when you've got a 3-team tiebreaker, then you look at the records against those teams that would be in your pod. So A-State would be, in this scenario, 3-1 against the Louisianas. And so, yeah, those are just some of the tiebreakers. Eventually, it gets convoluted enough that it could go to a coin flip. So, good luck with that.
Oh, man. So, again, it looks fairly simple on paper, but when you really start to dive into it, like you said, because there's a lot of other scenarios to still yet to be play out, which is kind of exciting in and of itself.
Yeah, but I'm almost legitimately sorry I brought it up because my head hurts now. And I apologize to anybody who just had to listen to that.
Absolutely. It's just it gets wild here. With that being said, let's talk about the women here real quick. They had a decent weekend. Probably should have went 2-0. A little bit of controversy in that Georgia State game here. But there you go. Look at the stats there. Georgia State in the upper echelon in terms of the conference record. Georgia Southern struggling. Neither team puts up a lot of points. Both rebound okay. Southern, surprisingly, has more assists per game than what Georgia State does, despite their record being on the other end of the spectrum here. But this was kind of one of those, it was a decent weekend for the ladies because you had to think that they were going to beat Southern. If they beat Georgia State, that's kind of a little bonus here. And frankly, probably should have beat Georgia State. Had multiple leads of about 8 or so in this one. Came down to the wire. Again, a little controversy there at the end of that game, but nonetheless, kind of let the game slip away a few times in this one.
Yeah, that was just kind of, look, it was very disappointing. You circled the last play there where Georgia State was, they tripped Jira Washington.
Oh, yeah.
It was inadvertent, but it was still a trip. They tripped Jira Washington. They're able to recover the basketball and get a bucket with, 2.3 seconds remaining, something like that?
If that, yeah.
But Arkansas State, at that point in time, had not made a field goal in almost 6 minutes. So
right.
Almost the final 6 minutes of that game, they're unable to get a bucket. And obviously that was what caused that loss, even though the trip did not help. And then you get to Georgia Southern, and personally I was a little bit concerned with the way the team would handle that. You know, you don't want that Georgia State loss to beat you twice.
Right.
And they didn't really show any lingering effects from that. That was a really weird game in the sense that in that game, Arkansas State's players inside, they just had their will. Or they had their way, excuse me. They could score at will over Georgia Southern in the paint. A-State had 46 paint points in that game because Jira Washington and Peyton Martin were unstoppable. But A-State was never able to pull away because Georgia Southern hit 14 threes that game. Or excuse me, 13 or 14.
Yeah.
Really, it doesn't matter at that point. It's way too many. And there was a crazy stat in this, and I can't remember her name, but a guard for Georgia Southern had 14 assists in that game. She assisted on every single one of Georgia Southern's threes. So 13, she assisted on all 13 of their threes. It was kind of crazy, but that's what kept them in it, and it kept Arkansas State from really just rolling in that one. But the issue now is, you know, you go back, and it would have been really nice for A-State to get that win over Georgia State because A-State right now is sitting at 9th in the Sun Belt Conference standings, which means that they would have to travel to the 8th seed in the first round of the Sun Belt Conference tournament. So you're looking at a quite possible scenario where Arkansas State plays Saturday in Louisiana, then they have to bus Monday to Coastal Carolina, then they have to be back in New Orleans by Wednesday if they're able to win that game. That's
logging some miles.
It's unreal to ask a team to do that. You know, I get that the Sun Belt they had to do something different about this tournament in New Orleans. It hasn't been good since it's been there, but in this situation, you're going to end up punishing some teams that have to travel in this case. Absolutely
here, and we've just been saying for the longest, bring it on back to Hot Springs now. I thought they were decent crowds there. And I think, too, and we can talk about the New Orleans site as a tournament host, I guess a different day here, but you mentioned the standings. Let's go ahead and bring them up there. Obviously, UTA still leading the way there. Only a half game up on Little Rock, or a full game up, I should say. 14-3, 13-3 here. Troy also up in there. Really, Arlington and Little Rock are fighting for that 1 seed. Troy, Georgia State sort of swapping for the 3 and the 4. App State there at number 5. Just go ahead and reveal them all there for me, fellas. Yeah, Texas State, South Alabama, Coastal, all right there, right by each other in that sort of middle class, and then Arkansas State, Louisiana Lafayette hanging on to a spot in this tournament and really looks secure because ULM at 3 and 13. Yeah, and in fact, they are in the tournament, and now it's just a matter of where are they going to go. And we mentioned a lot of confusion there with the guys. Well, it's the same way with the women as well. In fact, go ahead and throw that up for me, fellas, see what we have left here on the schedule. It's obviously going to be a lot of the same, but some of the other teams you see there are also involved in this as well. You've got South Alabama dealing with the Carolinas, Carolina hosting both of their, or on the road, excuse me, at the Alabamas. Arkansas State traveling, so big key there. But ULM has struggled a bit this year, so maybe that game could be the one where they sneak away with at least one win out of the weekend. And then how you see Lafayette, they're hosting both Arkansas State and Little Rock here. So again, even with the ladies, there's still a lot yet to be determined And to touch on a point, Kara, that you brought up, the way it'll work with the first round is the 7 will host the 10, the 8 will host the 9. So whatever the seeding is there. So again, with Arkansas State sitting at 9th, it's not likely they're going to climb up a lot, but there's still that possibility, and they could get some help because Coastal having to deal with both the Alabamas. As you saw earlier, they're both pretty good. So I guess try to help me out and try to balance this one out. Kind of how do you see this one working out? And again, that travel could be just brutal.
Yeah, it really could be. A-State is, on the women's side of things, it is a much clearer picture. Now, it's not, we don't know exactly what's going to happen, but it is a little bit more clear than the convoluted mess that is the men's side of things.
Yeah.
Because that is just, holy heck, that's overwhelming to try and sift through. So here's the situation with this. Basically, if Arkansas State wins out, you end up at 8-10, and you would hope that South Alabama would lose out and then also be at 8-10, and then maybe you could climb up into that 8th spot and be able to host that first round game, because that's really the only shot you have. Coastal Carolina has the tiebreaker over Arkansas State. Arkansas State has the tiebreaker over South Al. I think Arkansas State would have the tiebreaker over the Ragin' Cajuns even if the Red Wolves were to lose this game this week. So they're safe in the tournament, and I don't think they can drop lower than the 9, but you really, really want that 8 seed if there's any way you can get it, so you can avoid that trip to the Carolinas and then have to go back down to New Orleans. It's just a mess travel-wise. So you want to, if there's any way, be able to play at home. You want that game in Jonesboro.
Absolutely, and let me get your take on this just quickly, since I kind of brought it up here. What is your take on New Orleans hosting? Because ever since the jump, when they moved it from Hot Springs down there, it just hasn't really seemed to catch on as a big deal. And it's even on sort of the outskirts of New Orleans. If you ever go down there, it's at the University of New Orleans, their dome there, and it hasn't worked. But yet they're still keeping it down there. So what do you think?
Yeah. I think that they need to do it in alternating east and west sites in the conference. I know, look, as A-State homers, we'd love to have it in Hot Springs, because why not? It's perfectly convenient for us. That's amazing. That's also very, very not fair to about half the league.
Right.
But the issue with New Orleans is that it's just horribly supported there. I don't have the numbers in front of me, but every single year the NCAA publishes its basketball attendance report, and they also look at conference tournament attendance. The Sun Belt as a whole probably comes in 17th, 18th, 19th, somewhere in that range out of the 30-plus conferences that make up NCAA Division I basketball. That's during the regular season. That's where all the teams combined average. If you look at Sun Belt tournament basketball attendance, and I don't think I looked last year, but the years prior to that, it's not dead last, but it's
knocking at the door.
It's second or third to dead last, and it's not by very much. So it has not been supported there, and you understand why they tried to tweak it, and I get that, but I don't think what they're doing this year is the right answer because of how these teams are going to have to make travel accommodations on the fly, the possible amount of miles that teams could have to log if they've got to go from the east side to the west side of the conference back to New Orleans. It's just kind of a mess. So I think in the future, I think the best bet would be to alternate some kind of east and west sites, or, if you can find a area in kind of the middle of the conference geography wise, like a town that would support it. Hot Springs supported that tournament.
Sure did.
Can you find another place that will embrace it? Because New Orleans ain't it, man. They've got so much other stuff going on there constantly.
Yeah.
That to be honest, they don't care. They don't care if there is a Sun Belt tournament game there. They don't care if there is a Sun Belt bowl game there. And that's just the harsh truth of it. Can you find someplace else that will embrace this tournament and treat it as a big tourist boon for their town, and maybe make it fun for the people that are going?
Absolutely. I'm right there with you. I think if you found a Hot Springs-esque sort of city somewhere in the middle, where there'd be like Northern Alabama, Tennessee somewhere,
Sure.
it could be kind of a hit there. And if you guys have any suggestions out there, let me know. Tweet at me, at Jay Bir. Let Kara know, too, as well, at Kara_Richie. So nice plug there for you, girl.
Appreciate it.
Always. Let's get back into this thing here. Let's get back into football. You've got the nice background there on you from your profile pic there. Let's talk football. And you think, Jay, spring practice hadn't started yet. Man, we have got schedules. Schedules came out this past week, so we know where Arkansas State's playing. We know the dates that they're playing. We don't have specific times and all that kind of good stuff yet. But here we go. Throw it up there for me, guys, if you can. The non-conference, it's just 4 games right out the gate. They're going to host SMU. Then they're going to return the favor for UNLV. Then they're on the road. Their money game this year is against the University of Georgia. And then they will host SIU. And that will close out the non-conference. And I guess let's just kind of talk about that non-conference first, and then we'll get into the Sun Belt play here. I kind of dig it. I think it should be very similar to what happened last year. They should theoretically go 3-1 in this, 2-2 at the very worst, I think. But what do you think of the non-conference there?
I think it's an interesting slate, a nice slate. SMU is a little bit different since the last time the Red Wolves faced them. Obviously, there was a coaching change there since these teams met up a couple years ago. UNLV, I'm a little more intrigued by, and that's not a game I'm willing to just automatically write up as a win, for the simple fact that Armani Rogers is just ridiculous.
He's a beast.
Yeah. And that one's going to be at UNLV. I haven't even remotely started looking at personnel changes or how these teams are expected to be better or worse or anything like that at this point in time. But just that guy alone is enough to make you pause and not take this team lightly. Georgia's Georgia. It's going to be tough.
Yeah.
It just is. It is. And then SIU, I think that's a nice way to wrap up the out-of-conference slate. You get back into Jonesboro and you get ready for some conference play.
Yeah, and they're going to need a nice little home trip there because the next 2 weeks at Troy, at Georgia State, and then you kind of have this sort of 2 games in 3 weeks kind of set up with Louisiana Lafayette coming to Jonesboro. So this one's always heated. Home teams usually win. This is going to be one of them prime time ESPNU Thursday night setups, and then Texas State in the middle of the schedule. I'm going to get your take on this here in just a minute. Then visiting Monroe at the very beginning of November, hosting Coastal and Georgia Southern, another little revenge game there for him at home. And then they will wrap the season up on the road in Mobile. So one thing I did notice was that the conference kind of changed things up. They have been playing Texas State in the finale, kind of switching things up this year. I don't know if it's a matter of that rivalry didn't necessarily blossom into anything or what, but what do you think about that little switch? Because that was kind of the first thing that actually stood out to me in that conference setup.
I'll be honest, that's something I don't think I noticed until somebody pointed it out to me, that wasn't the final game of the season. Because I guess, as in the A-State mindset, I don't know of anybody who views Texas State as a rival. If you have a rivalry game that you end the season on, it would be the Ragin' Cajuns.
Yeah, absolutely.
Texas State is just it's the geographical neighbor. It's not the rival.
They're just kind of there.
Yeah, so I didn't really notice that. I think it's great because it does wrap up the season with what is an easy road trip for the Red Bull faithful. Mobile is not a city that is bad to travel to by any stretch of the imagination. So I think that's cool. You could have a little A-State South on Saturday, November the 30th. But otherwise, that's not really something that registered. I think I was so focused on just how many Saturdays there are on the schedule that it was a lot of other things that just kind of passed me by, I guess.
Yeah, and I know you talked to Terry before the schedule got released, and he was kind of teasing some things in this. And like you said, that was kind of probably the next thing that I noticed was there's an awful lot of Saturdays. Now, granted, things can change a little bit here to there, and especially in that non-conference, but the conference is usually pretty well set. So what do you think of that? Because I did see some gripes out there about how people seem to think just because you don't have a lot of midweeks that you're not necessarily important. And we've seen over the years that Arkansas State is one of the best draws out of the Sun Belt.
I think sometimes it's just the way things work out. I think there's only 9 total midweeks in the conference period. So there's not that many slots up for grabs. Troy also only has one midweek game, and with the high-profile out-of-conference wins they've had the past 2 years in going to Nebraska, going to LSU, you feel like they would be somebody that ESPN would push more towards that slot. But yet again, they only have one. I don't think they're that worried about it. I don't understand the complaints for
more
years.
Saturdays.
For years, all A-State fans have wanted have been more Saturday games, and you get 11 of 12 Saturdays, and now it's like, why doesn't ESPN love us anymore? It's just, I think it's hilarious. But I like this schedule for Arkansas State. I did see some tweets from some of the players being really excited about how many Saturdays were on it, just saying stuff along the lines of, the midweek games are just different in the sense that the time that you have to prepare, and then especially the time it takes your body to recover, it just kind of throws everybody out of whack. And this is a schedule where you have a steady standard game week, way more weeks than not. So I think this is great for the players for Arkansas State as much as it is for the fans. Absolutely,
and it's kind of a nice little blend, not an extended road tripping or anything like that, or too many games at home. Right out the gate, it's 2 on the road, 2 at home. Of course, over a 3-week period, then you've got Monroe and Mobile sandwiching, 2 home games there as well. And then I would be remiss if I didn't mention the Sun Belt Championship game is on December 7th this year. So maybe Arkansas State could get into that one. Just looking quickly at the West setup, you've got ULL and Texas State at home, and then you're on the road against Monroe and USA. And you're going to have to kind of get it right out the gate there. I can't emphasize enough that the first 2 road games are against the East. So if you happen to lose 1, 2, both, whatever the case might be, it's not the end of the world because we got divisions.
I just it's not the end of the world. Obviously, you don't want to get down that much and be kind of clawing your way out of a hole or looking for others to help you out, which is the situation that Arkansas State was in last year, and it didn't work. It absolutely did not work. I think one of the things I'm most intrigued about with the league this year is just how many new faces that we're going to see. There's a new head coach at Troy. There is a new head coach at Texas State. There is technically a new head coach at Coastal Carolina, a new head coach at App State, and then you look at some of these other schools, and it's not like there are guys that have been around forever and ever. I mean, is Blake Anderson not the elder statesman of the league at this point in time?
I think he would be at this point.
Yeah, unless there's somebody I'm just completely overlooking. That's
he's the old dog.
Yeah. So it's just this league has changed in a lot in the past couple of years, and I'm really intrigued to know what's going to happen, at Troy and App State, because I think they brought in good guys to helm those programs, but there's always attrition. There's always some kind of effect with a new coaching takeover, and you wonder what it's going to be in Troy and in Boone.
Well, I guess a lot of people would point to it worked out pretty good for Lafayette this past year, end up winning the whole darn division here. But I think you kind of mentioned this. It's hard to kind of really get into what you think about the schedule, at least from a football standpoint, just because we haven't gone through spring yet. There's still a whole fall camp to go through as well. But we'll have plenty of time for that. But I like this schedule. I don't know about you.
Yeah, I do. I mean, I just feel like it's balanced in the sense that you look at once you get into conference play, you don't have back-to-back weeks where you face bowl-eligible teams. You start out with Troy, who's really ramped up the wins as of late, but Georgia State was down last year. Louisiana, of course, was a bowl-eligible team. They played out in the Cure Bowl, but then Texas State has been down and has a new coach. ULM was bowl-eligible, didn't get to go. And then after a bye week, you follow them up with Coastal Carolina, who has had some struggles since they moved to the FBS level. And then kind of you alternate again at the end of the season, a 10-win Georgia Southern team followed up by South Al, who did not quite get to the level they wanted to be at last year with all of their offensive players returning. So just kind of back and forth. I feel like it's got a good balance.
Yeah, I'm right there with you, and I did forget to mention the bye week there in the second week of November. So thank you for pointing that out here. All right, so that will do it for us here. Not going to quite get in. Go ahead.
Wait. You told me I could talk baseball.
I told you could talk baseball. All right. Well, it's early in the season, so I know there's a lot of moving parts, and you're still trying to figure some things out. But quickly here, I guess, what do you think about this baseball team? Because it seemed like they were kind of on a roll, stubbed their toe against Louisiana Tech, did have a win against Central Arkansas, and I know that's kind of big for the whole in-state thing here. But it's kind of hard to kind of get a vibe on this team. Are they a pitching team? Are they a hitting team? Maybe a little of both. Maybe not really as good at both those things. Just because frankly, it's been hard to get excited about this team for the past few years because they've just been kind of mediocre in what is a very good league.
Yeah, and you know what? It's still way too early to say this is a team that can contend at the top part of, even the top half of the league because of how deep the league is. But there are absolute signs of improvement over the past few years, and that's not even with the record. The 8-5 record is decent. They bounced back last night with a 9-6 winner over UCA. They have another tough test coming up this weekend against Missouri State, who is the perennial favorite in the Missouri Valley Conference. But one of the things with this team that they've been able to do very, very well is pitching-wise, they did, before last night's game, they had the second best ERA in the Sun Belt. And one of the things this team does is they just attack the strike zone. 102 strikeouts heading into last night's game to only 33 walks. So that's been an issue in years past with just giving out way too many free passes on the bases. And we're not seeing that right now this year. So that is definitely something to be optimistic about because, look, that plays well no matter who your competition is.
Right.
You pound the strike zone, you don't give them free passes, and that puts your pitchers in a pretty good spot. So I have cautious optimism for this season.
I like that. We're being guarded here. Also, too, it seems like they are working the strike zone a lot better than what they have in years past here, at least in the early go.
They are getting a lot of guys on base. I mean, they've been issued a ton of walks, but they are striking out a little bit too much early on. And because of that, it's led to a ton of runners left on base. Now, they didn't have that issue last night. Only 3 left on. And they drew 7 walks, which is nice. But you go back to that recent series against Louisiana Tech, they left 28 men on the bases. The 3-game series before that, I think against Valpo, that was a series where they left 30 men on the bases. So you get 1 or 2 more timely hits in those series as opposed to striking out with runners on. Right. And then obviously we're seeing some different scores. Didn't really matter that much against Valparaiso. Would have mattered quite a bit. If they could have been able to find some of those clutch hits in the Tech series. All
right, so we got a little baseball in there for you, but we'll bring you back in, I promise. When your camera's working, and B, when we kind of get into the season a little bit. But we do appreciate you chatting with us and giving us your hot takes here. Where can the people find you?
I am on Twitter at Kara_Richie. Also, if you're in Jonesboro, you can listen in from 11 to 1 Monday through Friday on 95.3 The Ticket and KDA 970 AM. We also stream the show at 953theticket.com. And also, you can download the TuneIn app and search for KDA and take us with you on the go. I think it's clutch there, too. And also, I understand you're doing a lot of fundraising for the, at least the Northeast Arkansas Race for the Cure. Yes, thank you so much for mentioning that. I have a $2,500 fundraising goal, so I've still got a lot of work to do. But this is a cause that is very near and dear to my heart, and I have information posted on my Facebook. I have information posted again on Twitter at Kara_Richie. There's a link to donate and also a link to my page, which tells you the story about why this cause is, why I'm so passionate about this cause. So would appreciate any donations, any sharing. Also sign up for the race yourself. It's a great cause. You're gonna have a good time. Fundraise with me, run with me, all that good stuff. Absolutely there. So we'll definitely get you plugged in there. And you guys check that out. Donate. Great cause. And obviously we've got one of the soldiers out there on the ground doing some big things here. Kara, we appreciate you not only for that, but for jumping on here with us today. Sure. Next time I will have a working camera, but thanks for having me. We will definitely get it figured out here. All right, guys, so that's it. So again, a big weekend for the basketball teams on both sides. We're going to figure out if they're in the tournament, where they're going, all that good stuff. And we will definitely break that down for you coming up next week. All right, they're in there. They're telling me to shut up, so I will do that exactly. So until next time, my friends, we'll see you.